share some of the information that I have. So actually this month starts a year ago since my adventure with FND started, and it actually was July last year that I was officially diagnosed. But in that time frame, like I went from at the very worst, I was having like the stroke-like episodes. I was having the partial paralysis on the right side of my body, tremors, loss of speech, slurred speech, facial droop, severe migraines and headaches, triggered symptoms by position in the body, moving my head, using my arm would make me lose my speech, a whole bunch of fun things like that. And so in that time frame, I started implementing a process that I learned years ago called GABE, which there's a foundation to GABE, and then there's like the how to address the symptoms specifically that you're experiencing at that time. So when I got diagnosed and I realized I wasn't going to die from this, because that was like a big thing. Like we actually thought I had vertebrovascular artery insufficiency, and we thought that might be what's causing the strokes. Coming to find out it was the FND. And so when I got discharged from the hospital, I have to be totally honest, I was devastated by the diagnosis, and I felt like it was ridiculous. I was not happy and I was angry. And then as I worked through those emotions, I got to this place where I just accepted, okay, I'm not going to die from this. Because up to that point, my whole life had stopped. Like I did nothing but lay around or move slowly so as not to somehow trigger something catastrophic that was going to kill me. And so after that, I just got really in this mental place where it was like, okay, I'm not going to die from this. And if I'm not going to die from this, I'm going to live to the very best of my abilities, and I'm going to do everything I can to heal it. And so I've been in holistic medicine for years. I've studied under several mentors. I've learned tons of things that way. And so I started applying the principles that I learned there, which I had first learned in the book, Feeling Spirit Alive, Never Die, by Carol K. Truman, and then several other mentors through the years after that. But that basically, physically symptoms show up in the body that correlate to emotions or feelings that store in those parts of the body. So when I was discharged from the hospital, told it was FND, I was dealing with the stroke-like symptoms, but loss of speech, the paralysis still on the right side of my body, weakness in my leg. And so knowing what I knew then, I knew emotionally what ties to those parts of the body. So physically, when it comes to like your voice and speech, the emotions that kind of, if you will, store in that part of the body or affect that part of the body are emotions surrounding either not being heard, feeling like your opinion doesn't matter, feeling like what you say doesn't carry any weight, not feeling validated in what you say, not feeling like you have the space to speak up. There's a ton of different emotions that can affect the speech. For me, I was also dealing with severe limp and loss of use of my right leg, and tremors in my right hand, and excruciating right shoulder pain, as well as migraine centered on the right side of my head. And then if I moved my head side to side, I would actually lose my speech more. So I started there, understanding that my emotionally, this is where things are being targeted. So in myself, it requires an extensive amount of introflexion. I don't know if that's a word. Self-awareness to be able to like be really honest with yourself about what you're feeling and what you're dealing with, which hindsight last year when this was all happening, I was totally in denial about how much stress I was under and how much I was trying to carry the weight of the world on me and so many other things. But so what it starts with, and this is something anybody can do, is I use GABE, and it stands for Ground, Align, Balance, Excel. And so for myself, like even, so I got discharged in July, or the end of June, and starting in July, I started applying these principles. By the end of July, 1st of August, I was pretty much symptom free on a day-to-day basis with the occasional really big flare-up. And it was applying this principle. And so like today, I actually haven't had a flare-up since December 22nd. But if anything even starts to feel like I'm getting overwhelmed or I'm like this in the past has been something that might trigger a symptom or an episode with the FND, then I go right into using this. So GABE stands for ground, align, balance, excel. And the G is for grounding. And so taking into account your belief system, if that's God, there's a universe or whatever, grounding is connecting back to that life source or that place of what I like to identify as love, that place of unconditional love within ourselves and in the world around us. And just like if you have a plant that's in a pot, it's not stable. If a wind comes along, if anything happens, that plant is very vulnerable. Whereas if you took and planted it in the ground and give it nutrients, it has that ability to glean what it needs to and also release what is harming it. So that same principle applies in grounding in myself, and it's really simple. Now, I think half of the problem with FND is we're all very brilliant people and we're really great thinkers, and our brain gets in the way of everything. Like, we're so rational and we're so trying to process everything, and it's actually what makes it harder to heal because we are trying to process everything. And GABE is built on the premise of getting in a position to get your brain out of its own way. And so it's all built around questions. And anytime you're asking a question, you first have to come into yourself somewhere that's like a peaceful setting. So whether that's visually, you're thinking that you're maybe laying on a beach somewhere, you have a margarita in your hand, maybe it's with your family and everybody's laughing. You're just mentally pulling this image in of somewhere that's very peaceful and enjoyable. And then as you ask these questions, you're not asking them to think of an answer. Like, your job is to not think of an answer. You're not supposed to analyze the question. You're literally supposed to ask yourself it and then go back to that place in your mind that brings you joy and peace. And so when it comes to grounding, the question that I ask is, what does it feel like to become grounded and connected to God and the Creator, to the love source of the universe? And I take a deep breath. And I mentally am going to that place that's really peaceful. And you'll feel kind of like this calm feeling that kind of comes over the body. And as you're doing this, and after you've asked the question, your job is literally just to breathe. And hold that visual in your brain. And after a little bit of time, you're going to feel like this, like settled feeling, like that you're like at rest. And once you've got there, then I move to the next part of GABE, which is align. And this is built on the premise that, like, in our bodies, there's four parts of who we are, which, like, in the medical, it's really hard because they really only look at mental and physical. They don't acknowledge the spiritual and emotional. And so the aligning aspect of it is to bring ourselves back into alignment spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically. Because we are trained to be so much in our heads and so analytical and so everything like that. It's really easy to be disconnected from the others. So the whole purpose of align is to come back into balance in ourselves and quit letting one or the other pull us really hard, which is in FND, it's really easy to be so up in our heads because it's so scary. Like, the symptoms become so overwhelming and so terrifying that, like, your brain's just trying to stay alive. And so the aligned part of GABE is so important because it's helping bring that back into like a balanced place instead of letting the brain and the fear run away with it. So again, you hold that vision or picture in your mind of somewhere that's peaceful, that brings you joy, and then you ask yourself, what does it feel like to become aligned spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically, allowing all facets of my body to come back into alignment and harmony with one another. And then you breathe. And as you breathe, you're holding that picture in your head. You're not answering the question. You're just allowing your being to come back into alignment. And if I'm on the verge of a flare-up, like, this is the place where I really start to kind of feel like a calm, if you will, that comes over me. And so that's the aligned piece. And you'll feel like this, like maybe you can breathe a little bit deeper or that you can think a little clearer. And then the next part is balance. And this is, I think, the hardest part. Like with FND, it's so easy to be really influenced by the world around us. Like, we're trying to deal with everything in ourselves, but then, like, if your family's freaking out or your coworkers or people in your world are freaking out or aren't even on the other side, maybe they're not giving you the due diligence you feel like is deserved with what's happening. Or something comes along, really loud noises or really chaotic situations happen. it's like so easy to be like triggered and be like going into symptoms and going into these effects because you can't figure out how to deal with it. So the whole purpose of balance is that now that you're grounded and aligned within yourself, you're finding this place of balance with the world around you. And so when I do balance, it's basically just like that. Like I think of those dolls that are kind of like the stand-up dolls that have the weight in the bottom, that if you like hit it, it will fall over and stand right back up again. That's kind of the visual I hold when I'm doing the balance. And so I ask myself, what does it feel like to be balanced within myself and the world around me, knowing that come what may, I can maintain harmony and peace in my life. And as I ask myself that, again, I'm going back to that breathing, and I'm not thinking about an answer. I'm just allowing my body, my being, to kind of fill into that. What does it feel like to come into balance within myself and the world around me? And then as it comes, and like yawning is one sign in my body that I know like I'm settled out. And most of the time, by the time I get to the end of that, I am almost always symptom free. But sometimes there's not. Like, so December 22nd was a really, really hard day. And my husband was working. We had a family party we were supposed to get to. And my kids were being crazy. And my house was destroyed. And I had all of this stuff happening with work. Hi, Jardine. And I had all of this stuff happening, and it just hit me like a freight train. And I'm crying, and I've lost my speech, and my face is drooping, and I'm just a mess. And so I did the first part of Gabe. I grounded, I aligned and balanced, and then I just couldn't kick it. And part of that was stubbornness on my part. The other part was choosing to not truly let myself deal with the circumstances, which it's easy. Like sometimes when it's hard, there's no shame. Like you're just like, I can't deal today. This is the best I can do. And that's where I was at. And so for most of the day, I lost my speech. It was very hoarse and slurred and slow, and my face was kind of drooping to the side. And finally, by the end of the day, I was like, okay, Joanna, you have to take ownership of this again. You have to take your responsibility here and address it. And so I started asking questions again, because our brain doesn't know what to do with a question, because it's not about finding an answer. So for like myself, it was like, okay, what in my world is overwhelming me right now? And it could be just as simple as writing a list out and acknowledging really truthfully how you're feeling about things, about life, about circumstances. And then after you get it kind of written out, then it's asking yourself, what would it feel like if I could just let this all go? Or what does it feel like to believe in the possibility that all of these things can sort themselves? And it's these like open-ended questions that create the potential for the body to change or to shift. And as I did that night after I'd gotten home from this family party, I got my voice back and the symptoms all went away. And so that's the last major episode that I've had. And it's just learning to be really honest with myself. Like I have to be really paying attention to, am I allowing myself to be stressed and overwhelmed? Am I taking on things that aren't mine? Am I allowing myself to become totally consumed in fear? Like fear was, like I can see hindsight now, how come my FND symptoms got so bad? Because the fear was so insurmountable. Like I couldn't fathom how I was going to live through this because I didn't understand any of it. And the more that fear built, the worse the symptoms got and the more scary things got really quick. And taking that control back in myself, even, it'd be like if you're scared of the dark, having a really honest conversation with yourself about, okay, am I letting fear run away with this? Am I letting fear control the circumstance instead of myself? And like, for me, that's been the biggest factor, is being really honest with myself about, am I stressed and overwhelmed? Am I feeling anxious? Am I trying to take on too much? Am I allowing too much fear? Am I not taught, like with my husband, he's my right arm. Love that man. And I have him and a handful of people where I'll be like, okay, I just need some perspective outside of myself. And so those are kind of some of the things that I've utilized. There's a bit more to it, but that's the foundation. You can use the ground, align, balance aspect. And then the excel part is that asking open-ended questions to deal with the feelings as they arise, to be able to let them shift and move instead of hold them in our bodies, which I think makes the symptoms stay longer.